Well, hello everybody again. Today I'm going to continue what I was doing last time. I'm reading from chapter 1 of my new book, Out the Bottomless Pit 2, about the paranormal. And this is really a summary of my first book, Out the Bottomless Pit 1, or just Out the Bottomless Pit. Well, we got here to number 19. And number 19 says the mark of the beast and the image of the beast happen during the second part of the Antichrist's 7-year reign. Many writers have talked about the coming mark of the beast under the coming Antichrist regime, as shown in Revelation chapter 13. An unfortunate number for many of us. However, have you ever wondered why? Why the mark of the beast, in particular why now at the end of time? Why not under a past empire of man? To understand this, we again need to go behind the scenes of this physical realm, or matrix. Satan has ruled this physical realm for the past 6,000 years, mostly from the invisible realm, or from what some call the next dimension, around the earth and in fact within it as well. Apparently, Satan and his fallen angels, who in the past have had access to other dimensions, Job 1:7, and perhaps both our solar system and even other galaxies, with time they've been restricted more and more, and eventually they'll be totally locked up inside hell and then Tartarus, Revelation 20:1-3. One day soon, Satan and all his angels are going to be involved in a very big war against Michael the Archangel and the forces of light. And Satan's going to lose big time and actually get kicked out of the spirit world. See Revelation 12:7. Since Satan has had control over so many people on earth through demon possession and oppression from the spirit world, how can he continue to maintain control over them once he's thrown out of the spiritual realm? Satan knows that this will happen to him, so he inspires man to make microchips, which initially are started off something helpful and benign, such are implants in the brain to help those with impaired vision or hearing, or an electronic cyborg arm to replace an amputated one. However, Satan's aim is to eventually bring on total control of every human being's mind on the planet, and to make them into willing slaves and mindless zombies, or collective consciousness, or a type of Borg. This is interesting. This was written a long time ago, many years ago. But look at today, the King Charles III of England. He's going to have a big meeting with the World Economic Forum and the globalists in September, how they can bring forward their 2030 agenda, where such a time they want everybody to be electronically tagged. They want the rest of humanity that are not billionaires and trillionaires to be as the servants, while they, the aristocracy, rule using implants of all things. That's what they're talking about. So it's getting very close to the mark of the beast. Obviously, he will have to time the mark of the beast. Satan will have to time the mark of the beast in such a way that it happens just before he gets kicked out of the higher dimensions, or he's going to lose the control over millions of people. By the same logic and reasoning. Why do I say that? Because Satan controls people through their carnal minds. But suddenly you're kicked out and you lose the influence over humanity. He's going to have something or mechanism in place so he keeps control of most people. If he loses that contact through the carnal mind for a season, or for a while or a short time. By the same logic and reasoning, those who are truly saved and refuse the mark will no longer be constantly bombarded and pestered with the negative influences of a negative spirit world or hell. All static will disappear. Then their link to heaven will become much stronger, and cause them to become very bold witnesses of the truth, as Daniel 12:3 in the Bible states. Inspired writers. I believe the famous writers C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, with their famous inspiring books of Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings, were talking about future spiritual and physical battles, which are to come on this planet as the War of the Worlds begins in earnest. When the key to the bottomless pit is finally opened, all hell literally breaks loose. H.G. Wells also wrote about War of the Worlds, or invasion of planet Earth by giant robots. His invasion comes from Mars. He could not have known when he wrote War of Worlds that NASA has photographed many mysterious giant pyramids and a sphinx on Mars, as well as other strange phenomena. What were they used for? Some say that pyramids were actually stargates to other worlds. Is Mars perhaps one of the bases of the fallen angels masquerading as advanced aliens from which they will launch an invasion of Earth? H.G. Wells also wrote the famous book Time Machine. Were his writings also both inspired and predicting future happenings? Lewis Carroll, with his books about Alice in Wonderland, and especially the description of going down the rabbit hole to another world far underground, where things were very different in size, time, behaviour. A world where the size of things could be changed at will. The books about Alice, I think, were also giving us a little insight into the inner world, both the physical or the spiritual, a bit of both. The writer of the book, The Green Door, describes the inner world of hell and Tartarus as dimensions where things are inside out, upside down, as well as backwards, and a shrinking, diminishing world. Then you have the other very famous book, which is more obvious in content, as the very title tells all, Journey to the Centre of the Earth by Jules Verne. This book is both fascinating and very interesting, as it shows that there are tunnels, large underground caverns on the way down to the inner earth, whole lands and seas, and so-called prehistoric large dinosaurs. Jules Verne was clearly prophetic in his writings as he wrote about rocket to the moon in the 19th century. These are just a few examples of many books written about Middle Earth or Inner Earth and other strange subjects. 21. Many of those who study creation science will tell you that before the Great Flood, that the Earth was surrounded by a protective layer of water or canopy of water around 100 miles above the Earth. This scientific theory is based on Genesis 1:6-8. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, let it divide the waters from the waters. This layer of water supposedly protected those on Earth from dangerous radiation from the sun and from space. It would cause the Earth to have a greenhouse effect, and as a result, to have a uniform temperature. 22. This canopy of protective water could also apparently have acted as a giant lens and enabled those on Earth to see the moon and stars as if they were close up. I have a theory on this one. The people lived much longer than today, and up to 960 years, as the case of Methuselah, 969. The vegetation grew much bigger, and the people were much taller. It tells Ezra that before his time, mankind used to be taller, and in the future, as the world degenerated, people would get smaller. This is exactly opposite of what we're taught. Bang goes the theory of evolution, which is also denied by the simple second law of thermodynamics, which states that any object left to itself and given time will disintegrate, tend to a greater state of disorder, not integrate and bring complex order, as evolution erroneously teaches the very silly and improvable Big Bang theory, does not make any sense at all. I think about the only Big Bang is in the scientist's head. Those who believe in the silly theory of evolution. There are many examples in the Bible, other scriptural books, where clouds were used to deliberately conceal from the view of mankind certain things that are happening. There's a long list of scriptures in the index about this matter. 24. In Ezekiel chapters 1 and 10, God used UFOs and a throne. God's UFO and a throne show up initially concealed by clouds. I suppose that most people would notice this amazing event. In the case of Bermuda Triangle happenings, many of the accounts by witnesses of these strange occurrences start seeing odd coloured clouds enveloping a ship that is in the process of disappearing. In the case of the man-made Philadelphia experiment, they also report a strange green mist covering the ship. The Philadelphia experiment, 25. This experiment, 1943, was pivotal to understanding that the time continuum can be messed around with and actually altered. The ship vanished from sight for 9 hours. It was transported, dimensionally shifted, to a very similar port 100 miles north of the same coast. It reappeared 9 hours later at the port in Philadelphia. The sailors on the ship were never the same again, and many died early. Many of the sailors kept disappearing and reappearing for the rest of their lives, often short lives. When the ship did appear after 9 hours of vanishing, some of the sailors, to the horror of onlookers, rematerialized half embedded in the metal hull of the ship. Putting these facts together, we can clearly see that time and space can be altered to some extent. The big question is, by how much has it already been altered? Back in 1896, Nikola Tesla was one day utilizing his giant coil cage with him sitting inside of it. Millions of volts were involved in this experiment. Something went wrong, and Tesla says that suddenly he saw his own entire future life as well as his entire past and present life as if they were just a moment in time. Tesla, see Tesla the book, Man Out of Time by Margaret Cheney, it's a relative of his. This is a very similar experience to those mentioned in the case of life after death. According to Al Bielek and others like Nicholas Pressman, I might say Al Bielek, he was one of the crew members in the Philadelphia experiments, one of the survivors. So Al Bielek and others like Nicholas Pressman they tried doing this time-continuing experiment again in 1993. Something to do with the 20-year magnetic field cycles of the Earth. Yeah, look up those two names, Albielek and Nicholas Pressman. Those guys know a lot, or did. 26, the Montauk Project and Armageddon. This is a project about time. Man does not do anything or invent anything, but is given to him by inspiration from either forces of light or forces of darkness. When it comes to time travel, as mentioned as possible by Nikola Tesla in 1896, and brought to fruition by both Tesla and Einstein in first the Philadelphia experiment in 1943, and later their theories were used with the Montauk Project in the late 70s and 80s. Such a possibility would seem to put us in the realm of science fiction or even science fantasy to most people. But is it perhaps possible? According to Revelation 10, 6 and 7, the days are soon coming when time shall be no more. This would infer that we live in a sort of time matrix, which shall soon come to an end, at least in its limited present form. According to one of the wisest men who ever lived, Solomon, 3,000 years ago, there's nothing new under the sun. Which has been, that which has been, is that will yet be done. Ecclesiastes 1:9. When it comes to time travel and mind control, as well as mass mind control, how could the spiritual forces of darkness, opening in the shady realms behind the scenes of this world, or let's say in a slightly lower dimension than the physical existence, benefit by inspiring man to dabble in time travel, as in the Montauk Project? What is the ultimate purpose? 27. Zombie Army. Earlier on in this book, I briefly mentioned about the Tower of Babel and how the people building it acted not only like slaves, but more like drones of a beehive. Chapter 7. Yeah, you can see that well in the book of Jasher. You'll see my book, Jasher Insights, about Tower of Babel. Mass mind control. Let's examine for a moment that Satan, Lord of Darkness, and rule this present physical domain, as according to Matthew chapter 4, knows that very shortly his time will be up. After he gets a 7-year fling of being the Antichrist for the last 7 years of human history, the Lord of Darkness or Satan's goal has always been threefold. 1, to be worshipped as God. 2, control the world. 3, eventually destroy all of God's creation. So far through history, Satan has been prevented time and time again from totally taking over and totally destroying God's creation. Now in his modern times, he finally has the possibility in his grip, as only in the past 60 years, since the advent of the atomic age, has man the capability of totally destroying the planet. 2 Thessalonians 2, 7-10. God's protection of this planet, because of its continued extreme wickedness, will eventually be withdrawn. If you wanted to create a physical army which was the most vicious, violent, and totally insane, destructive army with absolutely no conscience, how could it be done? When Satan, the fallen angels, are finally permanently kicked out of heaven, Revelation 12:7, we can assume that also means they'll be kicked out of the higher dimensions, so that Satan and his hordes will in fact be stuck in the physical realm, or lower dimensions. What have many emperors and dictators done throughout history in the past in order to get rid of some undesirables? In order to take the blame away from themselves directly, they normally let some of the worst criminals and dangerous psychos out of prison with the promise of a legal pardon if they would just do some specific dirty work of getting rid of certain undesirables. Later, the authorities could have these same criminals assassinated by their own special forces using the excuse that they were only escaped convicts. Is it possible the Antichrist will use these exact same tactics, and even more so Satan, who is the one behind it all? Satan has been a sort of king of empires since the world began, as clearly shown in the seven-headed red dragon, Revelation 12. In the negative spirit world, Satan has hordes of very dangerous criminals locked up. Satan also trains many in his army in the spirit world. What if, and this is only an idea, Satan wanted to reuse some of the worst criminals or villains in the entire history of mankind, or the past 6,000 years, because they were excellent generals of armies and totally ruthless. Down in the earth, in the negative spiritual plane in hell, there are characters like Genghis Khan and Adolf Hitler, as well as many diabolical former Greek and Roman emperors. One day, after all of the truly saved have been resurrected and raptured to heaven with Jesus, at the very end of the 3.5 years of tribulation, thus all light has left the planet for a while, until Armageddon. This would then be the perfect time for the rising of a total darkness from the bottomless pits and tunnels all around the earth. There will be no restraining force. Satan has a problem, however, in that most of his forces are currently in the spiritual realm. 28. The ultimate purpose of the Montauk Project. Secret and very wealthy organizations financed this project for years, according to Nicholas Pressman in his book, The Montauk Project. In fact, he tells us they spent hundreds of billions on this one project. Why? In the future, Satan is going to be in a fix, as he knows that he has but a short time before he'll be defeated at the Battle of Armageddon, finally locked up in the bottomless pit. I believe he's inspired man to do the Time Project, mass mind control experiments using hapless and countless victims, who have been sacrificed, most eventually died, and were mostly children, 10,000 children sacrificed from off the streets. Why is it that often scientific so-called progress involves sacrificing either people or animals, such as in the case of the atom bomb tests? It is almost as if they're sacrificing to Satan, Lord of Darkness, without even realizing it. He's inspired man to do these awful experiments in order to be able to create a zombie army in the not too distant future? Question mark. I know that the following is possibly only a quantum leap of imagination, but, question mark, Satan could attempt to reunite Hitler with their young by going back in time, using some sort of futuristic scientific witchcraft to put their spirits back into their younger body. This could also be another reason why very soon after this happens that the seventh angel will sound, time should be no more. In that case, there'll be no more messing around with time itself. Of course, no one knows the ramifications of messing around with time, possibly causing a time paradox. Note that according to Revelation chapter 13, the Antichrist was wounded unto death and yet did live, and then became Satan incarnate, a voodoo zombie. He'll be resuscitated by scientific witchcraft and trying to imitate the resurrection of Christ. 29. What if? Scientifically speaking, we know of 12 major Bermuda Triangles, which is maybe possible. I also mentioned in the book of ENOCH, except he calls them portals, 12 portals. I'm certainly only theorizing here. The God originally installed the 12 Bermuda Triangles as multi-dimensional doors from the outer surface to the inner surface of the earth. We know that at the beginning of creation in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve had many powers built mentally, physically, spiritually that are not apparent to us today. It is also a valid argument that God would not create all the wonderful universe full of galaxies, stars, moons, planets, and mankind could not both see and appreciate them, as in the case if the Garden of Eden was created inside a hollow earth. If my theory is correct, then it could explain how that even if the Garden of Eden were inside the earth, Adam and Eve could still see the stars and sun and moon on the outside of the outer earth. Once mankind fell, he could no longer see through the crust of the earth, and also lost many of his ES powers. I propose that somewhere much later after creation, the former multi-dimensional doors, Bermuda Triangles, were reopened by the fallen angels, but for an entirely different purpose, and that was to ensnare souls on the outer surface and kidnap and bring them down to the inner surface to probably make slaves of them. Is it possibly that the possibility of the fallen angels in the guise of the Atlantean rulers placed the many pyramids around the earth and indeed under the Saragossa Sea right in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle? It is also interesting to note Bermuda Triangles being dimensional doors could enable the Earth's surface to appear see-through in certain places if one was attuned to that frequency, as I believe Adam and Eve originally were, as it states in the lost books of Adam and Eve. They could see into heaven, see the angels, and I'm just figuring they could also see right through the crust of the earth to see the beautiful, marvelous stars and planets, as though they were very close up. No wonder Adam and Eve were very sad and depressed and devastated when kicked out of the Garden of Eden. You can read about it in the lost books of Adam and Eve. Now you've got my book, Eden Insights. Mentions everything in the lost books of Adam and Eve. 30. Edmund Halley's theory of concentric circles inside the globe. There is a lot more on this topic, which I will not go into in this book, concerning the thoughts of the great discoverer of Halley's comet, but would like to write about it at a later date. But as briefly mentioned on page 30 in chapter 3 of this book, here again is what was stated by Edmund Halley. Edmund Halley's theory of the concentric circles or globes inside the earth, chapter 3. Halley believed the earth was a hollow shell about 500 miles thick, with two inner concentric shells and innermost core about the diameter of planets Venus, Mars and Mercury. The shells were separated by atmospheres, and each one had its own magnetic poles. The spheres rotated at different speeds. Well, that's one theory. Okay. 31. And there's a lot more on that one there, I won't read it all. 31. In the case of so-called alien abductions, where people are allegedly taken far underground, They also abused in different ways by these inner Earth beings. 32. UFOs. Many of the UFO sightings cause scientists to conclude from their behavior they are from another dimension. Scientists are becoming more and more aware that there are many other dimensions. They tell us that they can only detect 5% of the known mass in the universe, and there have to be other dimensions working behind the scenes of this physical universe to account for the mass discrepancy. Sounds very spiritual to me. 33. God banished the fallen angels from heaven, and he made their abode in the dimensions around the earth, as well as inside the earth. They sometimes put on dramatic appearances to scare mankind, as in the case of demigods of the past. I think we will see them put on amazing appearances in the time of the end. They are finally totally kicked out of the entire spirit world, Revelation 12:7. Then they will have to look very impressive to mankind in order to deceive them into believing they're aliens from a faraway galaxy come to rescue mankind, whom they will say that they seeded on this planet millions of years ago and have to help mankind fully evolve into a higher consciousness and thus give new fire and impetus to the theory of evolution. Of course, it's all lies. Finally, 34. Transhumanism. Some crazy scientists actually think that man can evolve with a little technological help. These transhumanists should read the article listed in the website indexed at the back of this book by top geneticists who states that after 30 years of studying population genetics, that mankind is actually getting smaller, weaker, dumber, and not, as evolution falsely claims, taller, stronger, and smarter. See my book, EZDRAS Insights. The famous geneticist goes on to say that the doctrine of eugenics, or not eugenics, I shouldn't say that, although that is a valid word too, but it's really talking about evolution. The doctrine of the evolution of the survival of the fittest is simply not true and not borne out by experimentation. He warns that even if the elite do wipe out 95% of the world's population, and that's one of their plans, reduce the world's population to 500 million, that's what it said on the Atlantia Guidestones before they blew it up recently, but it was there for 40 years almost. Goodness. He warns that even if the elite do wipe out 95% of the world's population of useless eaters, as called by members of the hellish Illuminati, it would not result in a better and more manageable world. Why? Because each one of us produces around 100 mutational gene defects which are passed on to our kids, and this applies to all of us, and the elite included. This famous geneticist concludes by stating that mankind is going to die out anyway, not evolve through transhumanism, but actually die, because these elitists, they say they're going to soon live forever through transhumanism. No, they're not. They're not. It's not going to happen. He also concludes that the Bible is 100% true in stating that since mankind brought sin into the world, mankind has started dying. And only the Saviour Jesus Christ can reverse our defective genome before we all cease to exist in this physical world. Please pray, tell others whom you think can handle this information. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And that was the introduction to my new book, Out of the Bottomless Pit 2, which is really a summary of Book 1. Here in Book 2, you've got a lot of other topics. You've got 70 different topics in this. Also incredible stuff to know about. You do get my books, the paranormal books, and Out of the Bottomless Pit 1 and 2. You can get that at Amazon, or you can order it from me. My email is stephen.strutt, S-T-R-U-T-T, at btinternet.com. You can order the books directly from me, £15 each. They're about 350 pages each of these books. It took me a long time to put them together too. So you got those 2 paranormal books, and you also got 7 insights books. One is ENOCH Insights, EZDRAS Insights, JUBILEES Insights, JASHER Insights Book 1 and 2, Eden Insights, Testament of 12 Patriarchs, that's a new book, just came out. And those are the books. So thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll get the books.